So I'm sure some of you have been wondering, what if someone took a popular character and fixed them by making them black and giving them a black accent so they can be more diverse? Because that will be a good way to inspire representation in comics, video games, and movies. Right?
Wrong.
Well, feast your eyes on the most sincere creation from Marvel that somehow pretended to be anti-racist and extremely woke at the same time, but clearly failed to understand their target audience because I don't know who they made this for, but it definitely is not for us. And looking at how this was received on social media, you can tell it went totally sideways.
The What If Miles Morales Was Thor issue is blowing up the internet for all the wrong reasons. From Asgard being Miles' hood, all the way to Frost Giants having fades, everything about this issue just missed. This issue relied heavily on black stereotypes and a misunderstanding of black culture as a whole, and that's why it fell so flat. I mean, who sat there and seriously thought by Odin's fade was the best thing to have Miles say? Everything with this issue has just shown how important it is to have black writers and black creators working on black characters.
Let's read a few lines from the comic so you can put into perspective how bad this is. Of all the 5 realms, Asgard is his hood. For Miles, you can see he's just that good, but he is low-key when he wants to be. Name on marquees like his uncle Loki. Odinson is the son of gods and kings. Got so many wings, check out all those rings.
I beg your pardon?
Hey, real quick, can we talk about what if Miles Morales became Thor? I want to say real quick, I'm not hating on the comic book. Hey, man, do what you got to do, bro. But it seems to me, whoever wrote this book, I think he was Hispanic and white, I'm not sure. It seems like they've never spoken to a black person a day in their lives. Here's a few examples. A guy crashes in the room, all eyes on me. What? And this panel hits you with that, man, that mission was straight fire. Come on, bro. Time to spin these hits. Now that was a banger. Right up in your face and diss you. Bro, get some black friends, bro. We got the classic upon classics. By Odin's Fade. I don't know, bruh.
Hey, how's it going and welcome back to my channel. From the intro of the video, you can already tell we have a very interesting topic to talk about today. So go grab your drink of choice, subscribe to the channel for the new people watching, and let's get right into the video. So some weeks ago, Marvel published their new Miles Morales comic where Miles Morales becomes Thor in an alternate universe. And apparently it was part of their What If series where they explored gender and race swapping different characters and telling their stories from this new perspective, which on its own is a pretty interesting idea. But just going through the few panels, you can immediately tell something feels a bit off. He now lives in a modern Asgard, which is literally shown as a New York neighborhood. There's sneakers hanging off of a cable to make it feel more like a hood. His hammer is covered in graffiti because he's black, I guess, ignoring the fact that Canon Miles is Latino. Miles wears a hoodie and Jordans to fit in with hip-hop and urban culture, which apparently is the only significant thing that sets apart BIPOC from everyone else. The way he talks and carries himself in the comic is extremely stereotypical, and it's exactly the kind of writing you'll expect from someone who does not properly understand a culture but tries to portray it using every single stereotype that has been spoon-fed to us by the media. And clearly, without even getting all the way to the end of this comic, you can just tell this is a stereotypical and terrible way of representing people of color in comics. The comic immediately got a ton of backlash on Twitter, with people calling the comics sincere and saying things like, why does Urban Thor feel almost more racist? Asgard is his hood? Got my chest heaving, which is literally a line taken directly from the comic's poorly written dialogue, while the writer was so focused trying to make every single line rhyme with the next, as if black people use rap as a form of discussion and interaction in their everyday lives. I've always found this type of shit fascinatingly disgusting. Why does Asgard become a hood? Because Miles Morales is Thor. That's all too often the black version of everything. Graffiti on Mjolnir makes it a black Thor's hammer. Get it? Because it's black. When I first saw this post last night, I read that very first line and was like, no. Then I came back, read the rest of the pages and was like, It got worse. The Twitter user Borg Posting made an entire thread calling the comic out, and it had 25k likes and over 2,000 quote retweets, which just shows you how much people had to say about this dumpster fire of a situation. Even Chase Conley had to leave a comment about it, and you can tell how bad your book is if a professional artist working in the animation industry for years leaves a comment telling you how much he just despises it. Ultimately, there is a lot to be said about inclusivity and wokeness in the workplace and media, and I have my criticisms when both are applied performatively, especially the latter. But diversity is unequivocally good if it means not putting the words "by Odin's fade" to ink and paper. Now, this is a very good point, especially the first part, because you can immediately tell when a group of friends or a company or studio hires those two POC staff and then use them as tokens to pretend they care about representation, but then they unanimously proceed to ignore every idea or contribution the POC add to the task or whatever it is the studio is doing. But using "by Odin's fade," "Asgard is his hood," and forcing other urban slangs in a comic book trying to make it diverse and woke just screams performative activism. But then another Twitter user made a comment trying to dispute this, saying, "Is it really racist, or is it just a lame and extremely dated attempt to try to appeal to urban youth from a person whose familiarity with black culture pretty much only extends to commodified representations in pop culture from their late teens and early adulthood?" That still means it's racist. If the only way for them to portray POC is by using urban slangs and stereotypes from 90s urban and hip-hop media, then that means they clearly don't understand representation enough. So let's clear the air on what exactly representation is. Representation is how media deals with and presents gender, age, ethnicity, national and regional identity, social issues, and events to an audience. Media has the power to shape an audience's knowledge and understanding about these important topics, and this is a very crude dilution of what representation is, but apparently it works for the context of this comic, I guess. And all these forms of media vary from TV shows and movies to anime and manga, cartoons and video games, and every other form of consumable media. It's important for people to see characters or personalities that look like them and share similar struggles like them, and go through obstacles, situations, and societal norms that the particular group that is being represented goes through in real life. This creates a relationship between the viewer and the character because everything they're experiencing is completely relatable. Some examples of representation in media are Afro Samurai, which is based on Afro and his adventures through feudal Japan, with notably strong influences from hip-hop culture in a good way, not like what we're getting with Miles here. Cannon Busters by LeSean Thomas and his amazing team, Black Dynamite, Boondocks, Encanto, Black Lagoon. At this point, the list can keep going. And if you remember any anime or film or cartoon that has good representation, please leave it in the comment for the rest of us to go and check out. On the other side of the spectrum, we have bad representation in media, something we're all quite familiar with, from Sister Crone from The Promised Neverland to Mr. Popo and Maki from Love Lab, who literally wears blackface to try to experience being black. These little examples of bad representation of POC in media are mostly caused by basing characters off of stereotypes of minorities while pretending to be woke, which just ends up looking very awkward and inadvertently racist. This article on the BBC website explains stereotypes as a simplified representation of a person, groups of people, or a place through basic or obvious characteristics, which are often exaggerated, which is something we see in all these examples, ignoring true values of POC and just fixating on their stereotypes to form the basis of their characters. Stereotypes are dangerous as they can lead audiences to generalize about people or places. It's obviously a common theme to see portrayals of POC in media simply neglected or just based off of poor stereotypes, which is exactly what this comic is doing. I can't seem to understand how the entire editorial team went through the first draft of the comic script and approved it without questioning anything or actually having someone, preferably a person of color, to take a look at it before finalizing and publishing this for the mass audiences to read. I'm guessing the writer wanted this book to feel like a blaxploitation-esque type of comic book filled with black superheroes and fighting against people oppressing his hood and other similar themes blaxploitation movies and cartoons had. But the problem is the dialogue is just too cheesy and stereotypical to be taken seriously. In as much as some of these blaxploitation movies had comedy as one of the elements that made the movies work, they still took characters seriously and not force every bad stereotype into awkward situations where it just looked totally out of place or didn't work. And as usual, everyone on Twitter had a lot to say and were mainly mad at the writer and editors for just trying to force representation without completely understanding how to even make it work. How about Europeans just stay in their lanes and not write scripts or comics for black or African characters now that Stan and his oversight is no longer here? End of story. We all know if it was reversed and an African person wrote it how disgusting Vikings really were, it will be a problem, which is why we probably will never ever see that happen. Whenever the roles are reversed, guess who still gets the short end of the stick? If this was written by someone of African descent like myself, I would have made Miles an Orisha, and specifically Shango, because he's basically like Thor but way cooler. It's actually funny how there are interesting stories that could be told of African gods and deities that can rival this story and probably be even better, but I guess we might just have to tell these stories ourselves one way or another when we have the chance. Blatant misrepresentations and stereotyping of black culture, anachronistic hip-hop references, and the fact that Asgard has a fucking hood? Something ain't right. The hip-hop references and tacky dialogue is what just pisses me off. Did they really think this is how black people talk? Trying to forcefully rhyme every sentence and turn every line of dialogue into rap is just beyond me. No one talks like that. Not even Eminem. And last time I checked, he's white. In case you didn't know Thor was black, now he put graffiti on his hammer. If we ever get an Asian Thor, I hope they turn his helmet into a rice hat so no one is confused. Let's just hope that doesn't happen. Because if it does, that will definitely be pushing it way too far. It's clearly obvious everyone was just not having it on Twitter, and after scrolling down so many threads of just comments bashing the book and questioning the reason for making something like this, I couldn't find one single comment with anyone just appreciating anything aside from the art in the book, which is actually pretty good and probably the only good thing about this book. Now I'm sure we have said this over and over, but it's best if we just stop race swapping already existing characters and just leave them how the original writers intended them to be. That way we won't have awkward situations like this where one culture just looks out of place in another culture because the character was race swapped so the book can appeal to a woke audience. And even if you really want to do this, don't rely on using stereotypical tropes and fancy cheap slangs to make your characters feel edgy and force them to fit into the culture you're trying to adapt. Things like names, clothing, and accessories are a good way to portray cultural influences without making it look forced or tacky, which is why the Black Panther movie was such a success and is one of the many references when people try to think of making something that can repeat the same success it had. Most of the time they just end up failing badly. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like, share this video with someone so they can at least understand how representation works, and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. With that being said, I will see all you pretty penguins in the next video. Peace.